You know, this person once said in front of friends, he said, you know, I've never been to a nightclub before. Everyone looked at him with shock because he said, I've never been inside of a nightclub. All of a sudden, a nightclub not being in there is a shock to everyone. Another one said, you know, I've never kissed a girl before. Everyone looked at him in absolute dismay. Not only in dismay, they thought he's a loser. And now they make movies about, you know, men who are losers because they can't get women, and they call them wimps and they're cowards. How things have changed around. Where women have lost their absolute value, men have lost their value, and this type of behavior is considered to be noble and courageous. Allahu Akbar. You're a warrior, you're a hero if you can serve your lusts and temptations. And then you have issues of rape and crime, and then you've got laws, especially in Western countries, that can't even solve anything. Just the other day I read in the paper about a man who was convicted in the court of law in Sweden. He was convicted of rape. You know what kind of rape? It says that the woman, she agreed to have intercourse with him. But, excuse me for the expression, he used some kind of contraception, I don't want to say its name, and the contraception broke. Based on that, she won in the court by claiming rape, even with her consent. So now their own laws can't even solve their own problems. They bring more laws that bring more problems for them. And Allah says in the Quran,
وَاللَّهُ يُرِيدُ أَن يَتُوبَ عَلَيْكُمْ
Allah wants to forgive you.
وَيُرِيدُ الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الشَّهَوَاتِ أَن تَمِيلُوا مَيْلًا عَظِيمًا.
Those who follow their own lusts and temptations, they want to lead you astray, away very far.
يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَن يُخَفِّفَ عَنكُمْ.
Allah wants to lessen the burden off your shoulders. He doesn't want you to fall into harm. He doesn't want you to fall into predicaments where you can't climb out of. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَن يُخَفِّفَ عَنكُمْ. These laws in our deen are only there to protect you. They are not there to cause you harm or restrict you, ya akhi. They are there to protect you because there's so much harm out there. وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Allah also tells us, follow my laws because you're weak. You're weak. Pass them and follow my guidance. I'm there for you. Like what your father and mother do. To keep you away from fire, keep you away from harm. They restrict you and place boundaries around you. We need boundaries from Allah, otherwise we fall into harm. And then there's AIDS, and there's HIV, and there is unwanted pregnancies by girls who are only 13 years old, 13, 12, 13. And what happens to the child? They put up for adoption. The child grows up without a father or mother. What oppression! What oppression! Only to repeat the same thing again and again. So there is great harm in this. And here we are, they're trying to tell you youth that doing these actions makes you a man. You want to become a man? I dare you to get married. I dare you to get married. Because to them, this is the most cowardly thing. They don't dare to get married, brothers and sisters. They don't dare to get married. I know of a friend who was sitting here among you, I don't want to point out to him, but he had a neighbor who was married to his wife for how long? As far as I can remember, maybe 20 years. They had children and in the end they divorced, they separated. They didn't divorce, they separated in a de facto relationship. They were too afraid to get married. I had a neighbor, she had a 3-year-old daughter, but they never got married, her and her partner. In the end, he left her for another woman. Obviously, he's going to leave you for another woman. He's too afraid to be a man. He doesn't want to get married because he's too deep in his lusts. And then turns around and she says, men, they're only after their ego. Of course, why did you take a man like that? Allah gave us conscience. Allah gave us guidance in our brains to think with. And so Allah forbids us from these things because not to bring us harm. And you know what's sad? Unfortunately, 80% of the time, majority of the time, women are the victims. Women are the victims in this situation. So you can see it's reversed now. What does the man want? The man wants to use and abuse the woman. Use and abuse the woman. And you know what? If these young girls were able to look inside and read what's in the mind of young men these days, well, I don't think any of them will even hang around as much as 10 kilometers away from a man, close to a man. They wouldn't want to. But the men, they like to deceive women, wicked men. They like to deceive women, wicked men, non-God-fearing we're talking about. And then you get this poor woman who thinks that, he's my boyfriend. We're going to stroll in, this is the image she has in her head. We're going to stroll in the park. He's going to pick up a daffodil and give it to me. Or a rose. Hand in hand together. And then we're going to wait until the sun sets. And the birds chirping around us in this beautiful park. Poor thing. This is what she thinks, right? But the man is thinking about one thing. And he's going to tolerate all of that until he gets to it. I'm talking about men with diseases in their heart, and there are many of them today. With the tabloid, with all the sceneries that you have out there, and all the things that are occurring, I feel very sorry for a lot of women, and I feel very sorry for a lot of men who have sold their youth and sold their chastity, sold their dignity to be so cheap. In the past, Arab girls here in this country, in Australia, in Sydney and in Melbourne, an Arab girl, only 10 years ago, was the most, I'm going to use lame terms because this is what they say, she was the hardest to get, okay? She was the most difficult to get to. And all those other boys, they knew that. My wife tells me when she was back at school, the Arab girl, she was untouchable. And the Muslim men, they used to always protect them. So they had ghira on their sisters in Islam. Wallahi, it is great sorrow. Only now, 6 years ago, I've been going to Sydney back and forth and in Melbourne, and these are the stories I'm hearing. Our girls are out there throwing themselves at the men, throwing themselves. And now the men are pushing them away. From where Allah put us, put our sisters to where they become like trash, cheap, because she wants some attention. And I say, subhanallah, to these men who pick on women who don't put their hijab, and I say, it's her fault, it's her fault. You come to a man and say, well, it's her fault. This is some culture we have, where boys are allowed to go out with the girl, do whatever he wants, because it's the girl's fault. Did you not know that in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the man first? In relation to this type of relation, He says, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, male, masculine term. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Tell the believing men to cover their gaze, to guard part of their gaze, meaning not to use their gaze too much. Then He says, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنْ. And then say also to the women, believing women, to guard part of their gaze. وَيَحْفَظْنَ فُرُوجَهُنْ. And to guard their chastity. وَلَا يُدْنِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا لِبُعُولَتِهِنْ. And not to reveal their adornments and their beauty except to their husbands, or to those whom they cannot marry, like her father, her brother, and other women. That's okay, in order to protect her own chastity. But Allah addresses the man first. So hijab actually applies to the man before the woman. Because hijab is not about a scarf on the head, habibi. Hijab doesn't mean scarf. A lot of people who say hijab, I'm going to wear the scarf soon. Scarf is not hijab, habibi. Scarf is just covering the hair, not revealing the body and covering the hair. You see them walking out with tight clothing, mashallah, and then she's got a little scarf on her head, mashallah. They calls it hijab. This is not hijab. Hijab is protection and veil. And for the man there is a protection and veil. The veil is their behavior. And the man also has a modest dress code as well. But hijab not only is in clothing but also in behavior. In fact, there is a greater emphasis on hijab in the behavior and attitude than there is on clothing in the Quran and in the Sunnah, ya ikhwan. So much about talking about the voice, about the socializing, how far you can go, about the manner that you walk, the way that you seclude yourself, the way you gaze at people, the way you present yourself. All of this is part of hijab, and clothing is only one little portion of it all. So my dear brothers and sisters, don't fool yourselves. Hijab to both areas. And that way you will guard yourself, guard your mothers, guard your sisters, guard your daughters, guard your wives, and guard yourselves. I know of some sisters who got fooled by the shaitan. They saw their brothers going out and doing what they want to do, and then what happens to the girl? as she grew up with her foolish, weak brain, and obviously with parents who don't know how to raise their children, she began to want to do what her brothers do. So she began to meet some girls who were corrupt, and she'd wait for the night. Her parents would think she's asleep and go out of her window with her friends, until finally she was raped. And this is one incident out of many. But the other incidents are, because you see, she goes out, someone spikes her drink, and what happens to her? And some of them, they are convinced that this is what they should do. These girls think that this is what they should do. Allahu Akbar. They become slaves to society. Slaves. And they call hijab slavery? This is an independent woman who doesn't want all of that. She has guarded herself from all of this. Whereas the other ones, boys and girls, they have made themselves slaves to their lust, temptations, and the society. So I challenge you to get married and become a man. I challenge you.